Welcome to the Student Success Stories podcast. Today we are joined by Parker Hoffman, a junior here at Baylor University. In this episode, we discussed how online classes might look different for a biology major like Parker, including what it's like to take online labs. Stay tuned to hear this and much more. Welcome to the Student Success Stories podcast, and today we're here with Parker, and we're just going to talk more about success with learning during the pandemic. Do you want to start off by introducing yourself and telling us a little about yourself?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Parker Hoffman. I'm a junior biology major here at Baylor, biology major, and then minors in biochemistry and church music. I'm not from Texas, I'm from Illinois, so that's been sort of a really fun time kind of adjusting to the new culture down here. But I love it. I love Baylor. Baylor's my home.
Yeah. I see here that you were taking mainly online classes. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Last semester.
Okay. So was that by design that you were taking mostly in person, or was that kind of something that just happened to occur?
It was mostly something that just happened. Sort of the nature of, I guess, being a junior is that a lot of the classes for juniors were switched to online. So particularly to get a lot of the professors that I knew I wanted to take, most of those sections were just online. So it sort of happened just on its own. I wasn't planning for it really.
Okay. How has it been going so far? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Don't have any feelings about it?
I think there are certainly pros and cons. One of the things I really like about online learning is the ability to kind of go at your own pace. So I think that, especially for me, with trying to balance school and extracurricular involvement and community involvement and studying for example, like for the MCAT, trying to balance all of those things together, it's been really helpful to not necessarily be locked into a tight schedule of classes. But one of the cons, I think, is that it really takes a lot of discipline up front to kind of, you take a lot more ownership of your studies when it's sort of on you to learn the material in an online format.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, in online classes, you are more responsible for your time management and for making sure that you know when your assignments are due and if they're even happening, because you're not always going to have a professor there to remind you. But what would you consider to have been one of the most surprising challenges to online learning?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that one of the things that really surprised me the most about online learning was how sort of naturally it came. I guess I thought that there would be a lot more of a like a barrier to online learning and to getting to know my classmates and to getting to know my professors. But I was really pleasantly surprised by just the amount of collaboration with my classmates that I felt like there was in that online format. Some of my professors who are online professors have actually been some of my favorite professors and the professors that I've gotten to know the best here at Baylor. And so I think that just sort of speaks to kind of the experience is what you make of it. You can certainly have like a very rich and fulfilling online experience, and it's more a matter of sort of you putting in the time and the effort to get to know those people and really make use of the resources that are there.
Yeah. How do you connect with your professors online?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is just it takes initiative, right? And that was something I struggled a lot with my first few years at Baylor, just being a new student and kind of being very timid and nervous and not really wanting to talk to professors, kind of seeing them as like in like another league or another class and not seeing them as people who really wanted to engage students. But I was all wrong. And I think it really just takes a level of intentionality and saying like, look, my professors are people who want to get to know their students. That's one of the main reasons why they're here.
Mm.
It's because they have a real joy and a real passion for teaching, and for getting to know young people, and helping sort of guide them in their careers and the steps that they're taking. So it starts with kind of acknowledging that fact. And then from there, I think it just shows up in really simple, small ways. You don't have to, go to your professor's office and talk to them for an hour about a paper they wrote. It can just be as simple as kind of saying hi to them when you see them, or kind of sticking around after class to ask a simple question. Or I've had lots of professors that have sort of just invited that, and kind of said like, hey, you can stick around and talk to me even if you don't have a question about the class. And so taking them at their word, because when they say that they want to get to know you, they really do.
Mm. That's true in a lot of cases. And I think the only thing I'd add to that is that some of my professors are still having the like virtual office hours. So you can always show up to those, and it's kind of the same as just regular hours where you show up and get to know your professor, and them just seeing that you made that small effort takes you a really long way. But yeah. What is something that you wish you knew before you started your online classes?
Yeah, I think so. Part of my experience that was a little bit more unique, is that in my like high school years, and sort of throughout my education before Baylor, I was actually homeschooled, and so a lot of the coursework that I did, even all the way through high school, I was sort of doing in a way that was more self-directed, and making use of a lot more online resources anyways.
Mhm.
So I wish that I had known, back then, how transferable those skills would be to online learning, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I wish that I had been able sort of in high school to kind of connect that, oh, someday this is going to be really useful, this skill that I'm learning right now, of kind of learning on my own and directing my own education in a sense. I wish that I had known that more in high school. But I think before going into like lockdown and online learning, specifically here at Baylor, um, I wish that I had been more prepared for how challenging it would be to manage my time, um, especially coming home. I mentioned earlier I'm not from around here, and so going back home to Illinois, it's always kind of a big deal when I get there.
Yeah.
And so I sort of left in the middle of that semester where we shifted to online, kind of thinking, um, that I would get home and that it would be a lot more of like a normal home experience,
Mm.
as opposed to really being, not really a diminished workload. And so that was I wish I had known, that I was still going to have to manage my time really tightly.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah.
And it's also just like wishing that you'd known that you were going to have to approach these online classes completely differently. It's
Mhm.
not like the hardest part is having to show up anymore. It's that you have to like prepare everything yourself
Mhm.
and yeah, really be independent in that way. So I understand that. That makes a lot of sense. Do you feel like it's harder to work? So are you working at home? You're doing your school at home?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it hard to separate when you're in class and when you're at home supposed to be relaxing? Does the lines ever blur and you feel like you're tired when you're supposed to be in class? Like how is that?
Yeah. I think that's one of the big advantages of kind of being on campus, is that there's sort of a clear delineation between, um, time for school and time for, your own pursuits, whatever that is, whatever you do in your free time. And so, yeah, doing school from home, it makes it a lot harder to kind of have that natural break. I've definitely noticed myself kind of falling into the mindset of it's school time all the time, because home is just where I do school now. And that's definitely not like a healthy habit to cultivate. As humans, like, we need rest, we need time to refresh and time to step away from responsibilities and from the things that are sort of weighing on us. And so I think that one of the best ways to sort of combat that mentality is to stick to a schedule that you would have had you been in person. So for me, what that looked like was, I was enrolled in sections of fully online, like biochemistry and physics, and several other classes that were online, but hadn't been online before. And so for me, it just looked like continuing to keep those classes in the same time slots that they would have been. So if I had registered for, 9 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday biochemistry, that's the time that I kept that class in my schedule. And just making sure to stick to that really helped me budget my time well, and kind of make it through the day without feeling like I was stretching out school and like dragging it out through the entire time. So,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What helps you stay motivated during your online classes where it's harder to be held accountable by your professors?
Yeah. For me, it's more of kind of a personality thing. I have always been kind of a very intrinsically motivated person. And the things that motivate me are more like intangible future goals. So I'm a pre-med student, so a lot of my motivation comes from what I see as my future career, and my calling as a physician. So for me, it's always been helpful to kind of connect those two things, connect what I'm doing in biochemistry or what I'm doing in genetics or any of those classes with, okay, someday this has some sort of real tangible value for the way that I interact with patients. So putting that schoolwork into that context of someday this is going to be valuable for me as I interact with people, that's what's always motivated me. But it's not the same for everyone. For some people, it's a lot more difficult to make those connections between schoolwork and eventual, career. So if that's you, then there are definitely ways to kind of create small goals for yourself and use those more intermediate goals as like stepping stones to where you want to get.
And it's it can be motivating to check those off, those smaller goals, as you're going along and trying to achieve a bigger goal. So that makes a lot of sense. Do you feel like there's any study techniques that you use for your online classes that you don't necessarily use for your in-person classes?
I have kept my my study habits pretty similar between online learning and in-person learning. But I think regardless of whether you're learning online or in person, the biggest thing that you can do to help yourself is to maintain a very like consistent method of study. So what I mean by that is not allowing the material to get ahead of you, kind of staying on top of what you're learning. And so for me, what that looks like is really building in time to my schedule to review the things that I've already learned, even if I feel like, I know this concept pretty well by now. I'll still kind of take the time to go back and refresh, because it's amazing how good we are at tricking ourselves into thinking that we know something. Really, it takes just a lot of repetition and a lot of sort of ingraining that material into your memory. And so that's one thing. I try to stay on top of material like that. The second thing is a consistent schedule. And so the way that I structure that for myself is that I try to, go to class during the day, but on the days that I go to class, I'll also take the time after class to review notes from like the previous 2 lectures or so. And so that gives me like a consistent goal to work towards of I want to cover this much review material per day that I've, absorbed new content.
Yeah, I feel like that approach would also work for in-person courses too. That's just a good way to look at things and like really solidify information that you've been learning. But the next question I'd like to ask, you don't have to answer it if you don't have an answer for it. But what I've seen a lot of people respond with when you ask them, what would you like to hear more about on the podcast? It's personal accounts of like, here's a story of when I succeeded or when I failed big time. So what is a time that you feel like you had a really big hindrance or you might have failed at something? How did you overcome that? Or what did you learn from that? It could be anything.
So organic chemistry lab was a really big struggle for me. And that was also I was taking that class during the semester that we switched online. So I kind of remember sort of floundering along in the class while we, for that chunk of the semester that we were in person. And then as soon as we switched to online, kind of going into like a little bit of panic mode of, oh no, how am I going to like get through this lab class when I can't even be in the lab?
Yeah.
And that really terrified me because a lot of the material that was on exams was things from, actual procedures that we had performed. So that was a really big challenge for me. And the main way that I decided to go about addressing that challenge and trying to solve it was 2 things. First, I made sure that I was communicating with my professor. I knew that this switch online was going to come with a lot of curveballs, especially transitioning a lab online just sort of out of the blue. So I made sure that I was keeping up with my professors and my TAs really, really closely and trying to, always make sure I had sort of the latest information, asking them questions if I didn't really understand an online component of a lab that we were supposed to do. And that was really helpful. And the second way that I decided to really address that was to really make use of my peers. It took me a while to sort of realize this, but eventually I kind of had that light bulb moment of, oh, like we're all kind of experiencing the same thing right now. It's not just my lab that went online, it's everybody. And so finding kind of solidarity in that and really making use of the people around me as like study companions or even just kind of asking questions about things that I didn't understand because there were certainly a lot of things in that lab that I did not understand. But those 2 things working in combination, I think, helped me really, end up with a good outcome in that class. And it certainly wasn't purely based on my own efforts. There's a lot of that is due to reaching out to other people and availing myself of that help.
Yeah. If you had one piece of advice you'd give to students that might be in the same hybrid learning situation as you, what would it be?
If, to distill it all down to like one single thing, I would say find a system, find an organizational system or a way to plan out your day and budget your time that works for you. It's not the same for everyone. And so if you're hearing me talk about my experience and thinking, oh, that wouldn't work for me, that might be true. My experience is different from yours. And so the strategies that I use may not be helpful for you, but find a system, find some way to organize your learning that works for you. I think the biggest challenge with online learning is that it can feel very kind of last minute and haphazard, and I'll just save all my video lectures that are recorded on Canvas for the 3 days before the exam. And it just becomes so easy to push things off and to say, oh, it's recorded. I'll just go back and look at it when I get to it. And that's the most dangerous thing you can do. So yeah, find a system that lets you stay organized, that lets you stay on top of it. And you'll thank yourself farther down the road.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. Well, we're coming to the end of our podcast here. I want to thank you for showing up and for being so helpful and so willing to share your knowledge on this subject, because obviously you've been doing really well. So yeah, thank you for talking to us, and sick 'em bears.
Absolutely, yeah, sick 'em.
Thank you for tuning in to the Student Success Stories podcast. You can listen to our previous episodes on iTunes, or you can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Student Success Stories. Would you like to be featured on the podcast? DM us on Instagram. Thank you for listening, and sick 'em bears.